Hi, I'm Bob Lentini from RML Labs, and in this video we're going to take a closer look at the peak limit normalize functions of the Levelizer plugin for Salt Studio. I'm going to start by opening a typical mix. It's a 14-track project. This mix has already been set up and I'm very happy with it. I've got basic EQ, compression, gating, reverb, so forth, a typical mix project. And what we're going to do here is use the Levelizer's peak limit normalize function to maximize the mix levels for a CD burn. First thing is to look at the output level as it stands, make sure that it's a good average and not peaking on its own. Now what we're going to do is come on down to the output channel itself, and we're going to patch the Levelizer in the post patch point. Now it must be the post patch point. The Levelizer, to perform this function, must be the very last thing in the processing chain. Nothing must come after it. Okay, I'm going to bypass the Levelizer at first because I want to run some tests. Now I'm going to use these tests to fine-tune and tweak the settings of the Levelizer prior to building the final mix. And in order to do this, I'm going to simply mark a small chunk of the overall project, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds. I want to pick an area of the project where maybe it's the loudest, most dense area of the mix, or maybe a sonically critical area of the mix so that I can listen for any artifacts that my settings might be introducing. Okay, at this point in the process, we're going to build a reference mix. We're going to use the Process Mix Down menu. We're going to select our normal destination output file for the mix. We're going to say OK. We're going to actually overwrite, or we're creating a brand new mix file as if we were doing the full mix, only here we're only doing this 10 seconds that we've marked. It goes by very quickly. The result is, in the sound file view, we now have a reference visual indication of the mix as it stands without the Levelizer. Alright, now what we need to do is get a handle on these transients. We need to control them so we can maximize the mix. So let me drag this over here so you can see what I'm adjusting. Let me unbypass the Levelizer, and I'm coming down to the peak limit adjuster. Now watch the threshold lines that become visible on the sound file view against the reference mix. I'm using those to adjust just above the dense yellow area, okay, which would be the average density of the mix. So I'm putting these up in the air a little above that, so I'm going to chop off any transient that rides above those threshold lines. Now the result can be visibly seen in this test by again choosing the Process Mix Down, same file, but this time choose No for the overwrite question. You're going to append the results so that you can A-B compare the original against the peak limit. Now here's the original transients, here's the peak limit, very much chopped off, very visibly different, but the magic of the Levelizer. Listen. No. Audible difference. The transients are not squashed, they're not compressed. In fact, properly set, there are no audible differences whatsoever, although there's tremendous visual difference. If you zoom all the way in, you'll note that the Levelizer will never flat top a signal. It keeps the signal shape precise, but scales it down to fit within the threshold. Okay, now once you're satisfied with your peak limit settings, you like the results, now we're going to turn on the Normalize function. Now the Normalize function reads in percentages, or you can change it to read in decibels. You definitely want to be at about 98%, I'd recommend, or at least at minus 0.18 or somewhere in there. Leave yourself some headroom. Now with the Normalize function active, we're going to build a mix again. We're going to again append the data so that we can compare the results and actually see the fruits of our labor. There you have it. Very interesting. Here's the limited, the maximized, the original, right in front of you. Look at those results. But more importantly, listen to the results. The mix, the sound, it has not been altered, only made stronger and more powerful and impactful. It gets to the CD at a much higher level, but your mix quality is the same. Zoom all the way in. Notice again, no flat topping. The average waveform shape has not been altered. The Levelizer is a magical tool. You can keep your mixes identical and maximize them with no artifacts. Very powerful. Final step, clear the marked area, Process Mix Down, say OK, and say yes to overwrite. Why? Because now you're building the full mix back into that same original file. Nothing could be easier or more powerful. Okay, let's recap a few important points here. When you're adjusting the peak limit lines, the threshold lines, make sure to not go too far down into the bulk average waveform density, so that thick yellow area, do not get those lines down in there. Get the lines above that area, so you're just capping off the transient peaks that stick out above the average waveform. This is critical. You can create a thing called clutter distortion, which is a very audible artifact. Another way is to play in the multi-track and take a look at that gain reduction meter. It should be short and bursty. Peaks no more than maybe 8 to 10 or 12. The meter should not be plastered across the entire display. Here's another quick test that I use a lot of times to find that critical point where we start introducing the artifacts. Go ahead and mark your 10-second area, start a new file, create the first build mix so that you can see the waveform result at a certain peak limit setting. Now come on down and take the peak limit down maybe 2 or 4 more %, and then go right back up and build the same mix again. This time, of course, make sure to choose no, so you start appending these test results back to back so you can see a visual. And then you can also use to listen. Now here you see the visuals down just a little deeper. I'm going to go in a little deeper yet. And I'm going to come down another 2 or 4%. And I'm going to build a third. Now you can do this a few times. Definitely take yourself further down than you think you should go. The advantage here, when finished, you now have multiple chunks that you can see and hear. So what you want to do is jump around, audition each chunk at the different settings. Listen in headphones closely. Listen for the one that sounds the best. Reset to those settings, turn on the normalize function, and build the best mixes of your career.